The millionaire CEO barely noticed the woman with the crying child at the charity gala until he saw the child's eyes. A chill ran down his spine. He had seen those eyes before, in the mirror. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The vibrant lights of the annual Blakewood Foundation Charity Gala illuminated the grand ballroom, casting warm golden hues across the polished marble floors. Designers, socialites, and philanthropists mingled beneath sparkling chandeliers, each hoping to contribute to a noble cause, while also being seen in the most prestigious event of the season. In one corner of this opulent gathering, a young woman stood nervously smoothing out the creases of her modest but elegant evening gown. Her name was Rebecca Morgan, and tonight she hadn't come just as a donor or a guest. She had brought along her 3-year-old son, Andrew, out of sheer necessity. "Mommy, I don't like it here," the little boy whimpered, clutching at Rebecca's skirt. His eyes darted across the unfamiliar sea of tuxedos and glittering dresses. He was unaccustomed to such lavish settings. Normally, Rebecca would never have considered bringing her child to an event like this, but her babysitter had canceled last minute, and with her invitation to the gala already promised to a local women's charity she volunteered for, there had been no choice. Still, she felt a pang of guilt each time Andrew shrank from the swirling crowds. Countless memories churned through Rebecca's mind. Only a handful of years ago, she had been a young intern with big dreams and a bright future. Then everything changed. She had met someone special, discovered the promise of love, and lost him before they'd even established a real life together. Their time was brief but intense, like a bright comet in the night sky. After that heartbreak, she'd built her life around raising Andrew alone. As she looked at her son, his wide, curious eyes tearing up from the bustle of strangers, her heart twinged. She had promised herself that nothing would ever hurt him the way she had been hurt. No disappointment or betrayal would ever touch Andrew if she had any say in it. "Mama has to be here for just a little while," she whispered, stooping to her child's level, her voice a gentle hush in the midst of the gala's lively conversation. "Then I promise we'll go home." He rubbed his eyes and tried to be brave, nodding with all the seriousness a 3-year-old could muster. Rebecca pressed a soft kiss to his forehead, hoping to soothe him. In truth, she was anxious too. She knew how these charity galas worked: public donation announcements, wealthy corporate backers, carefully staged photo opportunities. And one face hovered at the edges of her memory, a face that occasionally appeared in business magazines and on financial news channels: Gabriel Lawson, an illustrious CEO whose ambitious expansions had taken him from a small startup to the pinnacle of success. The same Gabriel she had once known so very long ago. She took a steadying breath. Would he be here tonight? The question gave her heart an odd flutter. Not that it mattered after all these years, she told herself. With the swirl of rumors about him, the unstoppable acquisitions and corporate triumphs, he was practically a legend in the city. But she was just Rebecca, a single mom with a mountain of responsibilities, standing in a borrowed gown and discount shoes, juggling her restless child. Andrew gave a sudden cry as the microphone squealed across the stage. Attendees turned their heads in mild annoyance. Rebecca rushed to pick him up, cradling him against her chest. "Shh, it's okay, darling," she cooed, kissing his temple. She felt waves of judgment from the nearest cluster of onlookers, though some wore looks of sympathy. Charity galas, after all, usually didn't see small children in attendance. At the podium, an event organizer began to introduce the special guests. Rebecca wasn't listening, focusing instead on calming her trembling little one. She rocked him gently, feeling his small arms clutch at her neck. She had begun to think that perhaps she should slip out early, forego any formalities, and call it a night. But she also knew her volunteer group counted on her presence for a brief speech about single mothers and health initiatives. If she left now, their cause would lose the valuable opportunity of awareness and sponsorship. Suddenly, Andrew started crying again, louder. Rebecca's cheeks flamed at the stares. Struggling to keep her composure, she nodded apologetically to the nearest table, scanning for a discreet exit. Before she could gather her belongings, a low, calm voice spoke just behind her. "Excuse me," the voice said gently. "Can I help?" Rebecca turned and came face to face with a tall man in a tailored suit. Silhouetted by the lights of the ballroom, she couldn't immediately recognize him, yet there was a warmth in his eyes, a quiet sincerity that put her at ease. She was about to shake her head and decline, but Andrew had other ideas. The little boy's tear-stained gaze settled on the newcomer, and he softened, almost as if he found him comforting. "Are you sure?" she managed to say, never wanting to burden strangers with her personal issues. "He's just overwhelmed. We'll just go." The man smiled kindly. "If you want to step outside for some air, I could find you a quieter spot. I know these events can feel a little stifling." He paused as Andrew clung closer to his mother. "I don't want to intrude, but if there's anything you need, a glass of water, a seat away from the crowd, just say the word." Rebecca exhaled shakily. Even though the man's face was partially obscured by the angle of the overhead lighting, she sensed he was someone used to handling stressful situations. There was a quiet confidence in the set of his shoulders and the calm tone of his voice. Andrew seemed to settle too, momentarily forgetting his tears. I don't want to be a bother," she repeated softly. "You aren't. This is a charity gala, isn't it?" the man quipped with a gentle grin. "I think offering to help might be part of the spirit." His gaze flicked to Andrew. "Hey there, buddy. You want to see if they have any juice or crackers up front?" Andrew peered at him, curious, his tears stopping for the moment. "Juice?" the little boy whispered. He had a small, trembling voice that turned heads just as effectively as a shout. Rebecca's heart seemed to skip a beat at the sight of this imposing stranger, a man who surely had better things to do at a high-profile event like this, kneeling to quietly comfort her child. It was almost disconcerting how natural he seemed at it. She tried to brush off the tension in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. I'm Rebecca. This is my son, Andrew." The man straightened, and in the glow of the nearby candelabras, Rebecca glimpsed the faint lines at the corners of his gray eyes. Something about them seemed so familiar. "Pleased to meet you both," he said softly. "I'm Gabriel Lawson." Her breath caught in her throat. All the oxygen seemed to leave her body at once, replaced by a rush of memories. Late-night brainstorming sessions at the old startup, a shared coffee after a particularly exhausting meeting, that one fleeting kiss in a corridor when they both realized their hearts might be leading them to something more. But that was ages ago, back before opportunity had come knocking, splitting them apart in ways neither had anticipated. Now the Gabriel Lawson that half the city revered, the unstoppable CEO of Lawson Innovations, was standing inches away, smiling gently at her son. Rebecca forced herself to remain composed, her throat tight. Had time changed her face so much that he couldn't place her right away? Perhaps. She had become a mother, after all, juggling countless responsibilities. And in fairness, his own features, though recognizable, bore the refinement of success and experience. He had become more than just the bright-eyed dreamer she once knew. "Gabriel," she said at last, her voice faint. She prayed he didn't pick up on her trembling. That's very kind of you to help." She felt Andrew relax, lulled by the sense of security in the man's presence. Before Gabriel could say anything else, the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, announcing a short intermission followed by an important philanthropic presentation. The crowd's applause roared anew, and the swirl of socialites parted around them like a living tide. The air crackled with tension for Rebecca. Should she flee? Should she reveal herself? And how could she shield Andrew from the emotional storm that threatened to break? Little Andrew nestled closer to his mother. "Mama, nice man help," he said, pointing shyly to Gabriel. The words, though innocent, cut through Rebecca. If only Andrew knew just how important this man had once been, and still was. Rebecca swallowed. "Yes, sweetheart, he's a very nice man," she managed, her voice trembling with unspoken significance. Meanwhile, Gabriel gave a gentle nod, unaware that the small child calling him nice was, in fact, his own flesh and blood. Rebecca felt the world turn into slow motion, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird in her chest. Standing only a few feet away, Gabriel gently coaxed Andrew out of his tears. The little boy pressed his flushed cheek against his mother's shoulder, his watery eyes now fixed on Gabriel with shy curiosity. Meanwhile, Rebecca's own gaze flicked back and forth, trying to reconcile the presence of the man who, years ago, had ignited a spark in her life only to vanish before that spark could catch fire. She recalled how, at one time, Gabriel's ambition had been a dazzling promise. He'd been hungry to prove himself, ready to take on a risky venture that would either soar or crash spectacularly. And she had been there, perched on the edge of that great unknown, when everything between them was heady, thrilling, and possibly more serious than either dared admit. Then, with startling swiftness, the relationship ended in a haze of parted ways. In the wake of heartbreak, she discovered she was pregnant. "Maybe we should step into the side corridor," Gabriel suggested softly, interrupting her reverie. The applause from the main stage was winding down, making the hush that followed almost deafening. "There's a quieter area near the coat room. It might help calm him. And you?" Rebecca gave a tight nod, too stunned to offer much resistance. Still holding Andrew firmly, she followed Gabriel to the edge of the ballroom, weaving past shimmering gowns and black tuxedos. Some onlookers wore faint smiles, viewing the scene as a charitable CEO simply lending a hand to a mother in need. Others looked on with polite interest, not entirely sure why Gabriel Lawson, who was typically surrounded by corporate magnates at events, seemed so intent on helping this unknown woman and her child. A hush embraced them when they reached the corridor leading toward the coat check. The warm, golden lights gave way to a softer glow, and the noise of the gala receded. Andrew breathed more steadily now, his face hidden against Rebecca's shoulder. She kissed the top of his head, murmuring a thank you for his patience. Then, with tender care, she let him down so he could stand, though he clung to her leg. In that gentler lighting, Gabriel's face came into clear view. Rebecca fought a swell of emotion, the intense recollection of their last day together, a tearful goodbye that had never truly felt final. He had parted from her with a reassuring promise that fate might one day bring them back together, but she had never believed it. Now here he stood, not yet realizing that fate had indeed brought them together. Only the consequences had grown far more complicated than either could have imagined. "Rebecca, right?" Gabriel asked slowly, as though tasting the name. He tilted his head, lines of thought creasing his forehead. "Why does that ring a bell?" His tone was careful, but confusion danced just behind his eyes. Her heart drummed against her ribs. Maybe she'd changed more than she thought. She remembered being fresh out of college, hair in a tight bun, brimming with determined energy. She had been starry-eyed, seeing in Gabriel a world of possibilities. "Yes," she said at last, forcing the word out. "We knew each other once, a long time ago." 100 memories pressed at the confines of her mind. Coffee runs, shared jokes, quiet confessions of dreams. Gabriel blinked, the gentle smile at the corners of his mouth faltering. "We did?" he echoed, scanning her face with more focus now. He seemed on the verge of making a connection but couldn't quite bridge the gap. "I'm so sorry if my memory's been battered by thousands of business lunches, countless meetings. I wish that wasn't an excuse. Perhaps you interned at..." He let the question hang, an apology in his voice. Sensing his genuine discomfort, Rebecca swallowed back her personal hurt. She understood a memory could blur after years of parted paths. After all, he had soared into a different social stratosphere. Why would he recall a brief romance that ended abruptly before he truly embraced success? But it stung all the same. His words trailed off as Andrew shuffled closer, tugging gently at Gabriel's sleek pant leg. Innocent, wide-eyed, the little boy murmured, "Thank you for helping me, Mr. Gabe." That small voice cut through the tension like a silver thread, and to Rebecca's surprise, Gabriel's expression softened at once. "You're very welcome, Andrew," he said, crouching to the boy's level. A flicker of recognition sparked again, like a puzzle piece nearly snapping in place but dancing just out of alignment. "And it's Gabriel. But Gabe's okay too." He gave a slight grin. "Do you feel better now?" Andrew nodded, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. Rebecca instinctively reached for a tissue in her purse, apologizing for the child's sniffles, the tears, the chaos. But Gabriel merely shook his head gently in dismissal of her apology. Then, standing once more, he turned his gaze back to her. There was a hint of sheepishness in his eyes. "So you said we knew each other?" His voice was quieter. "I'm sorry that I don't remember exactly how or when. Could you jog my memory?" Rebecca parted her lips, a swirl of old heartbreak colliding with her current reality. How much to reveal? How soon? The knowledge that Andrew was his child weighed heavily on her chest. But tonight, under the watchful eyes of sponsors and cameras, might not be the right moment. Another presence joined them just then, a middle-aged coordinator from the charity, stepping in with hurried courtesy. "Mr. Lawson," the coordinator said, flicking a glance at Rebecca and Andrew. "I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're about to begin the sponsor announcements, and the board would love if you could say a few words. Everyone's already assembled near the stage. Would you be able to join us?" Gabriel hesitated, turning back to Rebecca. It was clear that, for reasons he might not fully grasp, he felt drawn to remain with her. But the evening demanded his presence. A swirl of frustration ghosted across his features, though he maintained a polite front for the coordinator. "Yes, of course," he murmured, reluctant. "Rebecca, will you be staying?" This was her chance to slip away, if she so chose, to avoid the tidal wave of questions. Andrew looked up at her, a flush still lingering on his cheeks. She thought of the short speech she was supposed to give on behalf of single mother programs. The board of her volunteer group had insisted she speak, her real-world perspective being so valuable. If she left now, they would lose that voice on stage. So she nodded. "I have a small role in the presentations later," she managed. "We'll be here." "Good." Gabriel exhaled with a semblance of relief. "Then, please don't leave without saying goodbye." His tone carried a certain gravitas, like he was aware that letting her vanish a second time would be a mistake. Then he turned to the coordinator. "I'm coming," he said, guiding the man back into the main ballroom. The corridor fell silent, save for the distant hum of music and chatter. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly, letting the moment sink in. She could still smell Gabriel's cologne in the cool air, a subtle, clean fragrance that transported her to a time when they'd brainstorm about the future in a cramped office after hours. She felt Andrew's small hand slip into hers. "Mommy," he said in a whisper, "are we going home soon?" She knelt to ruffle his hair. "Soon, baby," she promised, giving him a gentle smile. "But first, Mommy has to talk about why it's important to help families like ours." Andrew nodded with a solemnity that squeezed her heart. Sometimes she marveled at how intuitive he could be, even at 3 years old. She pressed a tender kiss to his forehead, feeling more determined than before. Tonight wasn't just about a chance encounter with her past. It was about shining a light on struggles that single parents faced every day. And if Gabriel was truly the philanthropic powerhouse the headlines claimed, perhaps some part of him would be moved to expand funding for their cause. Hand in hand, mother and son ventured back toward the edges of the grand ballroom. They stayed near the wide door, away from the crowd center. Andrew's attention was caught by the musician tuning up near the stage, an act that seemed to calm him further. Rebecca's eyes, however, sought out one figure and one figure alone: Gabriel Lawson. She caught sight of him conversing with the Gala's biggest donors, those men and women who wrote 6- and 7-figure checks as if they were trifling sums. The swirl of conversation around him looked intense, but from time to time she noted how his gaze drifted across the room, searching for her amid the throng. Her cheeks warmed. Had he guessed? Or was he just trying to recall those fragments of memory that didn't quite add up? She cursed the trembling in her hands and tried to steady her breathing. There was no blueprint for telling a man he was a father, least of all in the middle of a formal event. Yet, a part of her recognized that secrets can only be kept for so long. She wasn't sure if she was ready, if Andrew was ready, for the tsunami of changes that would follow. But she felt the unstoppable tide of fate creeping closer. The overhead lights dimmed, calling the attendees' attention to the stage. A hush fell as the MC took the microphone once again, politely ushering people to their seats around the round tables set with shimmering centerpieces. Rebecca found a seat at the back with Andrew in her lap. She quietly snagged a dinner roll off a nearby plate for him to nibble on, ignoring any raised eyebrows. Then she focused on the dais, where each sponsor was announced in turn. A hush of anticipation built when they introduced the main philanthropic sponsor, Lawson Innovations. As the name echoed across the hall, scattered applause rose to a thunderous ovation. Gabriel approached the stage, exuding a calm confidence that radiated even to the farthest corners of the room. Rebecca's heart pounded. A memory surfaced of a younger Gabriel rehearsing a pitch for investors, stumbling through lines in an empty conference room. She had teased him back then, promising he'd soon be a pro at mesmerizing crowds. And now, here he was, poised at the microphone, a commanding figure in the city's philanthropic scene. "Good evening," he began, his voice resonating through the speakers. He flashed a composed smile. "I want to thank the Blakewood Foundation for hosting this magnificent event and for championing causes that truly make a difference. It's easy to write checks, but it's much harder to do the work on the ground, connecting with individuals and families who need our support the most." He paused to let his words sink in, scanning the crowd. This was a man who knew how to hold an audience in the palm of his hand. Yet Rebecca thought she glimpsed a moment's flicker in his gaze, as if he was searching for something or someone among the tables. Her breath caught, knowing it was her table that his eyes swept toward. "At Lawson Innovations," Gabriel continued, "we believe in creating pathways of hope. Whether that's through educational scholarships, healthcare initiatives, or job training programs, we want to empower those who might not have been given a fair shot. Tonight, I pledge additional funds to the Blakewood Foundation's single-parent outreach programs, because in my experience, resilience is most often found in those raising children on their own. With more resources, they could accomplish amazing things for their families and, by extension, for our entire community." Thunderous applause rippled through the room. Gabriel gave a faint, humble bow. Rebecca's throat constricted. She pressed a hand to her chest, touched by his words. She'd read about him in the news, his private foundation that aided struggling colleges, the grants for local small businesses, but hearing him speak about single-parent families stung with a bittersweet irony. If only he knew she had become a single mom precisely because he had never returned. Andrew, too young to grasp the nuances, applauded with the rest, small hands slapping together in delight. Rebecca drew him close, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. Perhaps this was a sign, some cosmic nudge that her truth needed to be told, because if Gabriel was so willing to help strangers, maybe, just maybe, As the applause died down and Gabriel stepped off the stage, the MC began introducing other speakers. Before long, it was time for Rebecca's volunteer group to present their short discussion on single mother support systems. Anxiety fluttered through her, but she steadied herself. With Andrew's little hand clasped in hers, she rose and made her way toward the front. As she neared the stage, she felt an electrifying awareness that Gabriel was close by, watching intently. Perhaps he'd simply recognized her from earlier, the mother he had helped. Or maybe he suspected something deeper. One way or another, she could sense his gaze on her like a question that demanded an answer. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribcage as she stood backstage with Andrew, waiting to be called up for her brief remarks. Even now, she questioned whether she was truly ready for this moment. Not only would her words represent countless single mothers across the city. In the audience sat Gabriel Lawson, a man whose life was once intertwined with hers, even if he couldn't fully recall it. The swirl of lights and murmured anticipation out front made everything feel oddly surreal. "Don't be nervous, Mommy," Andrew said in a small whisper, clutching her hand. His wide, innocent eyes radiated a trust that swelled her with courage. "You talk real good." She smiled at her son, pressing a quick kiss to his cheek. "Thank you, baby. You're my best cheerleader." The event organizer at the edge of the stage caught Rebecca's eye, giving her a subtle nod. That was her cue. She scooped Andrew into her arms. He was safest in her embrace, and she couldn't very well leave him on his own, and stepped into the gentle beam of light. An assistant rolled a short stool to the microphone so that she wouldn't have to juggle the child on her hip the entire time. Over 100 faces peered at her from the elegantly set tables, the hush broken only by the clink of silverware and a few last whispers. From behind the lights, she spotted the silhouette of Gabriel near the front. Instantly, a wave of remembered feelings and unspoken words tangled up inside her. She gathered every ounce of resolve, knowing her focus now should be on her cause, not on the personal tempest swirling within. Clearing her throat softly, she introduced herself. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Rebecca Morgan, and I'm honored to stand here representing many of the single mothers who have benefited from the Blakewood Foundation's programs. This is my son, Andrew." She let the microphone pick up his tiny wave, "and he's the reason I do everything I do." A few soft chuckles and warm smiles rippled through the attendees, along with a short applause. Public speaking wasn't her forte, but she reminded herself that her own story might touch the hearts of donors. The stage lights reflected off the tears that were quickly forming in her eyes. But she steadied her voice. "I want to share a bit about why help for single parents is so essential. When I first realized I'd be raising Andrew on my own, fear was my constant companion. I worried if I could pay for daycare, if I could handle working 2 jobs, if my child would miss opportunities that other kids got simply because they had more resources and support." She paused, letting her words sink in, remembering those nights of exhaustion, alone in a cramped apartment, teaching herself to meal prep and squeeze budgets. "But I found a community of people who understood my struggles. Foundations like Blakewood provided me with guidance, emergency grants for childcare, and mentorship that allowed me to continue my education and eventually land a stable position. These programs aren't about handouts, they're lifelines, stepping stones to a better future." Rebecca dared to glance down from the stage, her gaze landing on Gabriel. She couldn't read his expression perfectly in the semi-darkness, but she sensed his attention was locked on her. There was a slight tilt of his head, as if seeing her for the first time in a new light. It rattled her. Old memories threatened to overshadow the rest of her speech. Andrew gave a soft yawn, laying his head on her shoulder, unaware of the emotional storm coursing through her veins. She cleared her throat again. "I'm grateful, and my hope is that, with continued support, we can expand these services to reach more parents who might otherwise slip through the cracks. So, to anyone who's willing to give or volunteer, please know that your generosity changes lives." She managed a genuine smile. "Thank you." Modest applause rose up, along with a few whistles of encouragement. The host then stepped to the mic to graciously thank Rebecca for her heartfelt words. She retreated from the stage, relief mingling with a strange, bittersweet pride. Her part was done. Andrew gave her a sleepy grin and she guided him back to their table, ignoring the quick tears that threatened to spill. But as soon as she returned to her seat, she heard footsteps approach behind her. "Rebecca?" She turned to see Gabriel. Up close, she could trace the subtle changes in his face, the fine lines of experience around his eyes, the stronger angle of his jaw. He looked polished, certainly, but there was also a gentle strain in his expression, as though grappling with old recollections. Before, he'd seemed baffled by why her face felt familiar. But now, after hearing her voice echo across the stage, something seemed to click. He gestured toward the empty seat next to her. "May I?" Rebecca nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Andrew let out a soft, "Hi," which made Gabriel smile. The child's straightforward warmth broke the tension in a way that neither adult could manage on their own. "Your speech was remarkable," Gabriel said quietly, leaning in so they wouldn't disturb guests at adjacent tables. "I didn't realize you were so closely involved with the Foundation's programs. And, well, I want to say I admire your courage." Heat flared in Rebecca's cheeks. "Thank you. It's a cause very close to my heart." She ran a gentle hand over Andrew's back, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breathing as he started to doze off. Gabriel's eyes flickered thoughtfully. She saw a question forming in them, though he hesitated to voice it. Finally, he took a breath. "Rebecca Morgan," he said, testing out the name as if it held the key to a long-forgotten memory. Where did we first meet? I feel like we've had conversations before, but my mind is fuzzy on the details." A pang of sadness lanced through her. So he truly didn't recall. Did it mean nothing back then? Or had the years and endless obligations simply eroded that crucial piece of his past? She closed her eyes for a second, summoning courage. "It was about 4 years ago," she began softly. "Back when you were leading a small business incubator in the old Riverton building. I was an intern for a tech startup that shared office space on the same floor." Gabriel stared, absorbing her words. She watched recognition ignite in his gaze. "The Riverton building," he repeated, half to himself. I was still building Lawson Innovations from the ground up, bringing in local entrepreneurs, forging alliances. Your startup was something medical-related, I think?" She smiled thinly, relieved to see pieces of memory returning. "Healthcare analytics. I was a research assistant. We had that corridor with the flickering light, remember?" She was aware of her heart pounding. Now that she'd begun letting the old story resurface, how far did she dare to go? A slow grin curved Gabriel's mouth. "Yes, and I recall a short-haired intern who used to crack jokes about—" He paused, raising a brow. "The frequently broken coffee machine. You wrote a post-it note that said something like, 'Intelligence stops here. Beyond this point lies only heartbreak and stale grounds.'" Rebecca laughed despite herself, recalling that silly note. "That was me," she admitted. "I was so fed up with that machine, but we needed coffee to survive those marathon days." A fleeting warmth passed between them, the spark of shared history. Then the smile faded from Gabriel's lips, replaced by regretful realization. "Rebecca," he murmured, voice dropping to a hush. "You were the one. He faltered, memories swirling behind his eyes. "We spent a lot of late nights talking, didn't we? I remember telling you about my expansions, about how I might move to the West Coast if I got the right funding. But everything happened so fast, I left in a hurry. I didn't keep in touch like I should have." She lowered her gaze. The confession was incomplete, but it was a start. "Yes, you did leave quickly," she agreed. I suppose you got the big investor you'd been praying for and then soared off to chase success. I didn't fit into that plan. It took all her composure not to say more. She knew Andrew's presence was question enough, how it might shatter him to learn the truth in a setting like this. Gabriel's voice softened further. Rebecca, I can't begin to explain how sorry I am. So many pieces of my life blurred when the expansion started. I lost track of people who mattered. But I never meant to. He swallowed, words trailing off. Andrew stirred in her arms, letting out a small whimper. Immediately she soothed him. Gabriel's attention pivoted to the child with genuine concern. Is he all right? He's just tired. She pressed her lips gently to Andrew's temple. It's been a long night for him. And for me. From the dais, a new speaker had taken the mic, beginning a testimonial about mental health programs. In the background, subtle music played, prompting the final hour of the evening. Many guests mingled at the dessert tables, exchanging business cards and pleasantries. For Rebecca, the rest of the world felt oddly distant. Only the small circle that included Gabriel and her dozing son seemed real, pulsing with tension and unspoken truths. Rebecca, Gabriel said again, mindful of keeping his voice low, this might be too forward, but would you allow me to help you get him home safely tonight? At least let me arrange a driver, or perhaps a ride in my car. The city can be chaotic, especially this late. She hesitated, scanning the sincerity in his face. Many would have taken offense at the suggestion, considering it an intrusion. But Gabriel's eyes were kind, and after everything she'd been through, some help that night wouldn't be unwelcomed. Andrew had fallen asleep, heavy in her arms. Her shoulders ached from all the tension, both physical and emotional. That's very generous, she said gently, but we only live a short bus ride away. I'm used to managing on my own. Gabriel's brow creased. I know you are, but you don't have to, at least not this moment. Let me do this one small thing. A swirl of warring emotions kicked up inside her. She was proud of her independence, the resilience she'd built, yet refusing him might erect a barrier she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. Finally, she nodded. All right, she whispered. If it's not an inconvenience. Relief flickered across his face. It's not, at all. He stood, discreetly adjusting the lapels of his impeccably tailored jacket. Shall we? I'll signal my driver. He's just outside. Rebecca was about to rise when a wave of final announcements beckoned the attendees to stay for one last toast. She glanced around, unsure, but Gabriel rested a hand lightly on the back of her chair. We can slip out quietly, he said softly. I've made my closing statements. No one will miss me now. Careful not to jostle Andrew too much, Rebecca stood. One of the volunteers brought her coat, a light wrap that she tucked around Andrew's sleeping form. She could hardly believe the swirl of events, from a child's meltdown to a chance encounter with the man she'd tried to forget. And now she would share a ride home with him. The air felt charged with potential revelation. Come this way, Gabriel murmured, guiding her gently through a side exit. As they moved along, Rebecca tried to ignore the questioning stares of a few guests who recognized the powerful CEO and the single mother speaker leaving together. Once they stepped through the door, a cool night breeze caressed their faces. In the shadows of the parking lot, a sleek, dark vehicle waited. The driver, a sharp-eyed older gentleman, stood by with a polite nod. Mr. Lawson, he greeted respectfully, opening the rear door. Gabriel eased forward to help Rebecca inside, ensuring Andrew stayed cradled in her arms. She mumbled quiet thanks, her nerves rioting as she sank into the plush leather seat. Gabriel slid in next to her, the overhead light briefly illuminating his conflicted expression. He cleared his throat as the driver closed the door. Rebecca, if there's time, maybe we could talk a little more tonight. Or soon. I'd like to know how you've been. What your life is like now. His gaze flickered to Andrew, sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that the father he'd never known was only inches away. Her lips parted, heart pounding. The moment she'd feared, the moment she'd debated for so long, crept closer. Tell him now? Or wait? She forced a composed tone. "Let's get home first," she managed. "We can figure out the rest from there." As the car pulled away from the Gala's glittering lights, she felt the inevitability of the truth bearing down. The city streets blurred by, but inside that quiet, luxurious car, an entire world of secret confessions hovered between them. Gabriel's earlier pledge to support single-parent programs echoed in her thoughts, a strangely prescient promise, unbeknownst to him, of course, that the very cause he championed was also bound to his own blood. Night stretched across the city like a quiet promise as Gabriel's car navigated the winding roads toward Rebecca's modest neighborhood. The contrast between the sleek vehicle's interior, soft leather seats, discreet lighting, a faint hum of classical music from the stereo, and the row of older apartment buildings they passed could not be starker. Rebecca felt a twinge of self-consciousness. Would Gabriel judge the place she and Andrew called home? Would he see it as confirmation that she'd somehow failed to grasp the success he had captured for himself? But when she glanced over, all she found in Gabriel's expression was warmth, laced with guarded curiosity. He was watching Andrew's sleeping form, a gentle crease in his brow. Each time the car rumbled over a pothole, Rebecca instinctively cradled her son closer, mindful of his head lolling onto her shoulder. "Thank you again," she whispered, her voice low so as not to disturb Andrew. "You really didn't have to." Gabriel's gaze shifted to her, then drifted to the driver's silhouette up front. The partition window was closed, granting them privacy. "I'm glad I did," he said quietly. "I realize this must be uncomfortable, perhaps unexpected. But I can't pretend I'm not relieved to have run into you." Rebecca's cheeks warmed. "I understand. After so long." She left the sentence unfinished. Indeed, after so long, nearly 4 years of her life had passed in a blur of diapers, job applications, and quiet heartbreak. Gabriel inclined his head in agreement, then cleared his throat. "Listen, I know it's late. You and Andrew have had a long day, but there are things I'd like to say about the past and maybe about the future, if you'll let me." Her heart constricted with that word, future. For a moment she cast her thoughts back to when they were both younger and more naive, building dreams. She remembered them talking about new career pathways, about the difference they wanted to make in the world. But they'd never gotten the chance to talk about children, or what a family might look like. Now everything was different. "We can talk," she answered in a hush. "Just not tonight. Andrew needs to be tucked in, and I need time to think." It felt awkward to request time from someone who had, up until a few hours ago, been absent from her life. But she had to protect herself, and her son, from a storm of emotions. Gabriel nodded, accepting her words without complaint. "Of course." Then he ventured softly, "You mentioned working 2 jobs finishing school. I'd love to know more. Perhaps I could help. In some capacity." Part of her bristled, uncertain if that was pity in his tone. Another part felt touched. She recognized the sincerity in his eyes. He genuinely wanted to support her in the same way he supported countless philanthropic causes. But this time, it was personal. "I appreciate the offer," she managed, careful. "But I've come a long way from the intern you once knew. I have a good job now, accounts manager in a small health nonprofit. It's not glamorous, but it's stable." A faint smile graced Gabriel's features. "Glamour is overrated," he said quietly. "I know 100 wealthy people who are miserable. Real meaning is found in—" He paused, glancing at Andrew. "Well, in the everyday things that matter. Purpose, family, connection." Rebecca studied him, the gentle lines around his eyes, the earnest tilt of his brow. Was this truly the unstoppable CEO the city whispered about? The man who closed deals worth billions, who rarely slowed down long enough to see old friends? Strange how life could circle back, offering them both a second look at what might have been. Just then, the driver eased the car to a stop at the curb. Through the tinted window, Rebecca saw the familiar outline of her apartment complex. Plain stucco walls, a flickering porch light that threatened to go out at any time. "We're here," she said, exhaling shakily. She shifted to open the door, but Gabriel motioned for her to wait as the driver hurried out to assist. She straightened, careful not to wake Andrew. A cool breeze greeted them as the car door opened, carrying the faint smell of old pavement and the trace of someone cooking dinner in a nearby unit. Gabriel stepped out first, then gently turned to help her. His hand hovered near her elbow, an unspoken gesture of support without overstepping. "Would you like me to carry him inside?" Gabriel asked, voice hushed. She hesitated, shifting Andrew's weight. The boy stirred, scrunching his nose and burying himself deeper against Rebecca's shoulder. A swirl of conflicting emotions passed through her. Did she trust Gabriel to hold her child? The logical part of her whispered that there was no harm. He had, after all, unknowingly fathered this little one. But her protective instincts flared, uncertain if it was wise to risk Andrew waking up in a stranger's arms. "It's okay," she finally said, mustering a soft smile. "I've got him." Gabriel nodded, understanding, perhaps reading the conflict in her gaze. He simply retrieved her small handbag from the seat and offered it. The driver, who remained silent but watchful, dipped his head politely, then returned to the car. Rebecca led Gabriel up a short flight of stairs to a battered metal door. She fumbled for her keys, shifting Andrew so she could slip one into the lock. A click, and the door creaked open, revealing a humble living area. The furniture was second-hand and mismatched. Toys were neatly stacked in a corner, evidence of her best attempts to keep the chaos at bay. Still, an air of warmth pervaded the small space. Pictures of Andrew on the walls, a simple kitchen visible through an open arch. "Please, come in," she said quietly, remembering old lessons in hospitality. "I'm sorry if it's cramped." He stepped inside, carefully closing the door behind him. The overhead light buzzed to life, illuminating dusty, peach-colored walls. Gabriel's gaze lingered on the array of Andrew's drawings pinned to the fridge. Robot stick figures, colorful rainbows, a messy attempt at the alphabet. His eyes softened. "You have a beautiful home," he said, and though she knew it was objectively far from luxurious, the sincerity in his tone reassured her. She gestured to the couch, slightly threadbare but comfortable enough. "Could you just wait here a moment?" she asked. "I need to put him to bed. Then we can talk." Gabriel gave a quick nod, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Of course." Rebecca headed down a narrow hallway to Andrew's small bedroom. Moonlight glowed through the curtains, revealing a bed covered with cartoon character sheets and shelves lined with picture books. In a practiced motion, she laid Andrew down, carefully taking off his tiny shoes and tucking him in. He stirred briefly, his eyelids fluttering, but soon he settled back into slumber. For a moment, she stayed there, listening to the boy's gentle breathing, savoring the few seconds of quiet. Then she steeled herself, pressing one last kiss to Andrew's forehead before stepping out and closing the door. In the living room, Gabriel was examining a photo frame on a side table. At the sound of her footsteps, he turned, putting it down gently. She realized he'd been looking at an old snapshot of her and Andrew at a park. Andrew, only a year old, perched on her lap with a beaming smile. They stood there, a short distance apart, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. "He's out cold," Rebecca said softly, trying to break the tension. "Long day for him," Gabriel replied. And for you too, no doubt." She swallowed. Gabriel. The name felt heavy on her tongue, weighted with years of longing, confusion, and a secret she had protected like armor. "Back when you left, It all happened so abruptly. You had your big break, your investors." His expression darkened with guilt. "Yes, and I let everything else fall away. I told myself I'd come back, tie up loose ends, keep in touch with certain people. With you." He glanced away, swallowing. But every day was a new crisis or opportunity. Before I knew it, half a year had passed. Then a year. And I kept thinking it would be too awkward to reach out. I convinced myself it was kinder to leave the past in the past. Her eyes stung. She remembered each month that drifted by, feeling the absence of his calls. Then she'd realized she was pregnant, fear gripping her. She had debated telling him, but each time she tried, another wave of news about his massive expansions or rumored overseas deals reached her. Her pride flared. She didn't want to be seen as chasing him or pulling him back from his ambitions. "Gabriel," she said at last, voice trembling, "we were more than just acquaintances. I cared about you, about us. I never expected you to abandon your dreams, but I also never thought you'd disappear without a word." He stepped closer, hands outstretched as if to reassure her. "I know," he whispered. "I was a fool and I regret it. Right now, seeing you again, all those memories are flooding back. I should have handled it differently, and I'm so sorry if I caused you pain. That's the last thing I ever wanted." A tear slipped down her cheek, though she tried to brush it away quickly. "Life has a funny way of surprising us," she managed. "For a long time I wondered what would happen if I saw you again, whether you'd even recognize me, or if you'd care." "I do care," he murmured, voice hushed and steady. "I hope you believe that." Rebecca inhaled slowly, crossing her arms as if trying to hold herself together. "Listen, there's something you should—" Then, as she tried to utter the words, a lump rose in her throat. Did she truly want to reveal everything now, in this small, overheated living room, with her emotions still raw from the gala? Part of her wanted to, but a protective instinct for Andrew roared. How would Gabriel react? Would he feel betrayed that she hadn't told him earlier? Or would he expect instant rights to a child he didn't know existed a day ago? She forced herself to take a step back, physically and emotionally. "It's late," she whispered, her resolve faltering. "We can't unpack 4 years in one night. I think we should take a bit of time to get our heads straight." Gabriel's face flickered with disappointment and concern, but he nodded. "You're right. I don't want to overwhelm you after you've had such a long day." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek business card. On it, his name and direct contact details were embossed in silver. "Please, if you need anything, or if you just want to talk, call me or text me." Her gaze dropped to the card, remembering the intangible walls that once separated them. Perhaps it was time to tear them down, brick by brick. Gingerly, she accepted the card, heart pounding. "Thank you," she said, "for everything tonight." Their eyes locked, a quiet tension humming between them, 1,000 unspoken words, a cascade of memories. Then Gabriel forced a small smile. "I'll leave you to rest. Good night, Rebecca." She followed him to the door and quietly opened it. The hallway light flickered again, creating fleeting shadows. "Good night, Gabriel," she whispered, her voice carrying an undercurrent of everything she hadn't said. He exited, steps echoing down the stairwell. Seconds later, the rumble of his car's engine drifted up from the street, and in her modest apartment, Rebecca sank onto the old couch, business card trembling in her fingers. In the other room slept the undeniable truth of their past, Andrew. Sooner or later, she would have to tell Gabriel the full story. She only hoped that when the time came, her heart, and Andrew's, wouldn't be shattered by the aftermath. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of Rebecca's apartment, rousing her from restless sleep. She rolled over, her eyes drifting to the clock on the nightstand, nearly 7. Andrew was already awake, of course. Faint rustling noises from the living room told her he'd found his puzzle pieces or crayons. She threw on a robe, her mind still heavy with the events of the previous night. Would she look at the day differently now that Gabriel had reappeared? A knot of confusion tightened in her chest. Stepping out of her bedroom, she found Andrew seated on the floor with a coloring book, scribbling a bright sun that nearly tore through the paper. The boy noticed her at once. "Morning, Mommy," he chirped. "Look, I'm coloring the rainbow." She forced a gentle smile, trying not to show the swirl of thoughts rolling beneath the surface. "That's beautiful, sweetie." Reaching to smooth his hair, she wondered if he sensed the slight tremor in her hand. No, he was too young and absorbed in his colorful masterpiece. She moved into the kitchen, quietly starting a pot of coffee. Her gaze wandered to her phone, which she'd left charging on the counter. She exhaled softly. Would Gabriel text her today? Would he call? Did she want him to? "Breakfast, Mommy?" Andrew piped up, looking for his cereal. He was already in motion, retrieving a small bowl from a low cupboard. "Sure, baby. Let's see what we have," she replied, grateful for the normal rhythm of morning tasks. Soon enough, she had 2 bowls of cereal ready. Andrew perched happily on a stool, chatting away about how he dreamed of the fancy party last night. "Do you remember the big lights?" he asked between spoonfuls. "And the nice man who helped me?" Her heart gave a little jolt. Andrew didn't realize how loaded that question was. "Yes, I remember," she said softly, stirring sugar into her coffee. "He was very nice." The child nodded, satisfied. "He said he liked my teddy bear." Then he frowned. "Mommy, will we see him again?" Rebecca paused, her spoon stilling in her mug. Would they see Gabriel again? If so, how? She shook off the question, not wanting to burden Andrew. "We'll see, sweetie," she said gently, pressing a light kiss to his temple. "Let's not worry about it right now." After breakfast, they followed their usual weekday routine. Rebecca dressed Andrew for daycare, helped him tie his little shoes, packed a snack. Then she prepared for her own workday at the nonprofit, where she managed donor accounts. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked more apprehensive than usual. She smoothed a hand over her blouse, inhaling deeply. She'd faced so many struggles alone. She could face this too. In the hallway, a neighbor greeted them with a cheerful wave. Outside, the same bus she always took rattled to a stop. Once they boarded, Rebecca balanced Andrew on her lap, the child excitedly pointing out the window, calling out the familiar landmarks. She nodded and smiled, her mind elsewhere. She considered Gabriel's business card tucked safely in her wallet. Was it crazy that she was tempted to call him, or at least text him a friendly hello? After all, he'd offered to help. He'd been earnest, and she still felt that connection, no matter how complicated. Yet the bigger question loomed. Andrew's paternity. Rebecca wasn't naive enough to think she could hide it indefinitely. She also couldn't just hand over the revelation on a silver platter. She needed clarity on Gabriel's intentions, on whether he wanted to be part of a child's life, or if his philanthropic streak just made him feel obligated. These questions gnawed at her. By mid-morning, she'd dropped Andrew at daycare and arrived at her own office. Her desk was situated in a small cubicle, stacked with files and half-finished grant proposals. She made polite conversation with a coworker who teased her about the late night at the charity gala, but her laughter felt forced. Her head was full of unspoken secrets. Sinking into her chair, she turned on her computer, only to find an email waiting from one of the foundation's representatives. With a slight flutter of dread, she clicked it open. "Dear Ms. Morgan, thank you again for your heartfelt speech at the Blakewood event. Several sponsors were deeply moved by your story, including Mr. Gabriel Lawson of Lawson Innovations. He inquired about ways to expand our single-parent support funds. We'd love to schedule a follow-up meeting soon, and we'd be thrilled if you could join. Would you be available next Tuesday at 2 p.m.? Warm regards, Sandra Williams, Blakewood Foundation Coordinator. Rebecca read it twice, the words blurring in her vision. So Gabriel was making moves already, wanting to step up involvement, specifically relating to single parents. Did he suspect that Andrew was his? Or was this simply another philanthropic decision from one of the city's wealthiest men? Her heart hammered. A meeting? That meant they'd be face to face again. The carefully maintained world she'd built, mother and child, forging a life without outside interference, felt wobbly. She glanced down at her phone, wanting to check if Gabriel had messaged her directly. Nothing. Perhaps he was leaving the ball in her court, or perhaps he was busy. She reminded herself he was a CEO with countless meetings and responsibilities. But the email was evidence enough that he hadn't brushed last night aside. Chewing on her lip, she typed a quick reply to Sandra, confirming that she'd be available for Tuesday's meeting. Her nerves flared again, but a voice within coaxed her that maybe this could be a step toward a solution. If he was truly willing to open the conversation, she could gauge his reaction, maybe discern if it was safe to tell him about Andrew. The morning dragged on, her focus scattered. At lunch, she stepped out to a small cafe nearby. She sipped soup by a window, tapping her phone. The card's number burned in her memory. With a heavy sigh, she typed a short message. "Hi, Gabriel. This is Rebecca Morgan. Thank you for your help last night, especially for the ride. Andrew and I got home safely. Just wanted to let you know I appreciated it." Her heart pounded as she hovered over the send button. Then she pressed it. Within moments, the little paper airplane icon vanished, leaving her stomach knotted. Minutes passed with no response. That was fine, she told herself. He was probably busy. She forced a steady breath and willed her thoughts back to work. She had to finalize a donor report by the end of the day. She had responsibilities, far more urgent than waiting for a text from an old flame. But halfway through the afternoon, her phone buzzed. Her pulse kicked up. She picked it up to find, "Rebecca, thank you for the message. I'm glad you and Andrew are well. It was my pleasure to help. I realize it might be too soon, but if you feel comfortable meeting for coffee or lunch one day, I'd love to catch up, only if it fits your schedule." She stared at the message, her cheeks warm. The courtesy, the gentle tone, it was so different from the abrupt departure that once defined him. She typed a cautious reply, "Coffee sounds nice. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. I'm quite busy at work this week." A white lie, she was busy, but not impossibly so. She wanted some control over how fast they moved. Another text pinged in, "Of course, no rush. By the way, I'll be meeting with the Blakewood Foundation soon to expand their outreach. They mentioned your name. Perhaps we'll cross paths there. Take care." She swallowed. So he was aware she'd be in that meeting too. A swirl of adrenaline coursed through her at the thought of discussing single-parent programs with him, and all the unspoken context that conversation would carry. Shaking her head free of her daydreams, she forced her attention back to the spreadsheets. Work, she reminded herself. Keep it together. By 5 o'clock, she was drained, both from the workload and the emotional toll. She picked Andrew up from daycare, greeted by his usual excited chatter. He waved a crayon drawing in her face, a big house with tall windows. "Someday I want a house like this," he declared, eyes shining with childlike enthusiasm. Rebecca's chest tightened. "That's a lovely house, sweetheart. Maybe one day we'll have a bigger place." She ruffled his hair. They returned to their apartment, where she fixed a simple dinner of pasta and veggies. As Andrew ate, she mulled over the upcoming meeting with Gabriel and the foundation. She imagined the polished conference room, the slide decks, the official talk of expansions, grants, and resources. Yet all the while, she'd be sitting across from Gabriel, keeping secret the fact that the bright-eyed boy with the crayons was his own. That night, she tucked Andrew into bed as he babbled about the day. The overhead light cast gentle shadows across the room. She read him a story about a brave little train, and he nodded off with a content sigh. Once sure he was asleep, she retreated to the small living room, sank onto the couch, and stared at the phone on the coffee table. Part of her longed to type out a storm of confessions, to quell the anxiety by telling Gabriel the truth. Andrew is your son. But the enormity of it was paralyzing. She knew once she unleashed that knowledge, neither of their lives would be the same. She sat there, thinking about Gabriel's new philanthropic push. Did he truly want to help families, or was it driven by guilt? Maybe this was a test. If he stepped up for other parents, perhaps it indicated how he'd step up for Andrew. Could she observe him, gauge his motives, before making the biggest announcement of her life? The lamp on the end table flickered, casting a warm glow over the photos of her and Andrew, snapshots of a life Gabriel had never witnessed. She thought of the lonely nights, the hospital visits, first steps, first words, moments she'd had to celebrate alone or with neighbors who took pity on her. How would she explain all of that to him? Exhaling, Rebecca forced herself to stand. Overthinking wouldn't solve anything tonight. She padded into her bedroom and changed into a comfortable t-shirt. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The routine hustle of single motherhood, an upcoming board meeting at work, and the knowledge that Gabriel Lawson was back in her orbit. However ill-prepared she felt, the reality was clear. The path toward truth had begun. And as she drifted into uneasy dreams, a small voice of hope whispered that maybe, just maybe, this time she wouldn't be facing it all alone. The following week moved with both dizzying speed and agonizing slowness for Rebecca. Her days unfolded in their usual rhythm, dashing around the apartment in the morning, prodding Andrew to get dressed, juggling calls at work, and sneaking in errands between daycare pickups. Yet in the background, a quiet anticipation built toward Tuesday's meeting with the Blakewood Foundation and Gabriel. She tried to steady herself by focusing on the mundane tasks of life, grocery shopping, laundry, bedtime stories. But the flicker of tension remained, reminding her that a confrontation of sorts was drawing near. On Tuesday morning, she woke before dawn. Andrew slept on, still curled into his superhero blanket, oblivious to the swirl of adult worries. She tiptoed around the apartment, making coffee and mentally rehearsing what she'd say if Gabriel cornered her with personal questions at the foundation. She knew they'd have colleagues and donors around. It wasn't exactly the place to drop a life-altering revelation. Still, she braced herself for his presence. She dressed in a subdued navy pencil skirt and a crisp white blouse, her typical professional look. A quick glance in the mirror showed anxious eyes and a slight tremor in her fingers. "Calm down," she whispered to herself. "It's just a meeting about funding. You can handle it." By the time she got Andrew to daycare and arrived at her office, her nerves had only escalated. She tried burying herself in spreadsheets, but her thoughts kept spinning to the upcoming meeting. At lunch, she could barely eat more than a few bites of a sandwich. Finally, at 1:30, she set out for the foundation's downtown building. The imposing structure loomed amidst glass high-rises, its lobby sporting marble floors and tasteful artwork. She signed in at the front desk, the guard directing her to the 15th floor. Stepping off the elevator, she was greeted by a receptionist who led her to a wide conference room. Through tall windows, the city skyline stretched beneath a hazy afternoon sun. Around the heavy wooden table sat several familiar faces from previous events. Sandra Williams, the foundation coordinator who'd emailed her, 2 other board members, and a smattering of staff, but no sign of Gabriel yet. "Rebecca!" Sandra called warmly, gesturing for her to take a seat near the front. "Thank you so much for making it. We're just about to finalize the presentation for Mr. Lawson and the other sponsors." Rebecca forced a polite smile. "Happy to be here." Minutes ticked by. Sandra went over slides that detailed the Foundation's current single-parent initiatives, scholarships, emergency childcare vouchers, career counseling. Rebecca listened with half an ear, occasionally offering a suggestion or clarifying data, but her heart pounded each time someone entered the room. Still, no Gabriel. At exactly 2:02 p.m., he arrived. The door opened, and Gabriel Lawson stepped in with a calm, unhurried air. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, his expression measured yet polite. As soon as he spotted Rebecca, a hint of warmth lit his gaze. She offered the tiniest nod, ignoring the curious glances of a few board members. "Apologies for running a bit late," Gabriel said smoothly, taking a seat near Sandra. "Thanks for accommodating my schedule. I'm eager to hear what you have planned." Sandra beamed. "No worries at all, Mr. Lawson. We've just reviewed the basics. We're thrilled you want to expand the single-parent outreach. It's such a critical area of need." He nodded thoughtfully. "I've done some research since the gala. It seems a large portion of single-parent households face issues beyond finances, such as mental health support, flexible work hours, educational gaps. I'd like to target these issues with strategic programs." Then his gaze flicked to Rebecca, lingering. "And I know we have someone here who can speak firsthand about those challenges." Rebecca felt the heat of every gaze pivoting in her direction. She swallowed, forcing a composed smile. "Yes, well, I've certainly navigated a lot of obstacles personally. If I can help shape these initiatives so they actually address real-life problems, I'm happy to." Sandra brightened. "Wonderful. Perhaps, Rebecca, you can outline some of your experiences and suggestions just as a framework?" Mr. Lawson asked specifically for real stories to guide funding decisions. Her stomach twisted, so he'd asked specifically for her input. "Sure," she said softly. She stood, moving to the head of the table where a screen displayed bullet points. Turning back to the small group, she described the difficulties she'd faced, finding safe, affordable childcare, accessing emergency funds when her car broke down, juggling college classes. She spoke with calm clarity, even as her heart thudded each time her eyes connected with Gabriel's. He listened, elbows resting on the table, fingers loosely linked. There was no arrogance in his posture. On the contrary, he appeared fully engaged, occasionally jotting notes or nodding in agreement. The rest of the Foundation board members peppered Rebecca with questions. She responded with measured insight, determined to keep her personal vulnerability in check. After 20 minutes, the group paused to regroup their thoughts. Sandra looked pleased. "Rebecca, that was fantastic. This perspective is exactly what we need to fine-tune the next phase of our outreach." Gabriel spoke up, his voice resonant but gentle. "I agree. Hearing these specifics changes the way we allocate resources. I'd like Lawson Innovations to set up a pilot program, maybe a partnership with local businesses to offer extended childcare hours or subsidized in-home care. We have a research unit that can assess the best models." One of the board members grinned. "That's incredibly generous, Mr. Lawson. Our community has been needing something like this for ages." He waved a hand, dismissively. "Call me Gabriel, and I'm just following Rebecca's lead. She's shown me where the gaps are." Rebecca's cheeks warmed. She sank into her chair, relieved the focus had shifted off her. The meeting continued, evolving into a brainstorming session about budgets, timelines, and potential policy changes. While others hashed out the logistics, Rebecca occasionally caught Gabriel's eye. The flicker of something akin to pride or gratitude shone there. It unsettled her, sending both nerves and a strange reassurance through her veins. At last, Sandra declared the meeting wrapped. She checked her watch. "This has been hugely productive. We'll prepare a formal proposal for Mr. Lawson's review by next week. Thank you, everyone." Her gaze turned to Rebecca. "And Rebecca, thank you so much for stepping up with your input. Would you be willing to consult with us again as we refine these plans?" Rebecca nodded, her voice steady. "Of course. It's a privilege to help." Gabriel rose from his seat, collecting a sleek leather folder. "Sandra, do you mind if I borrow Rebecca for a moment? Just want to run a quick question by her before we all leave." Startled, Rebecca saw Sandra grin knowingly. Not at all. Take your time. Some of the others exchanged curious glances, but no one objected. As the board members filed out, chatting among themselves, Gabriel stepped closer, lowering his voice. I wondered if you could spare a moment privately. Her heart stumbled over itself. Sure. He guided her out of the conference room, into a smaller side office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bustling downtown streets below. It was silent, save for the distant hum of air conditioning. She turned to face him. What is it? He paused, studying her face. For the first time that afternoon, a hint of vulnerability softened his features. I just wanted to say thank you, he said gently. You were the one who opened my eyes to this need. I was already supporting single moms through the foundation, but hearing your story, both at the gala and here, made it real in a different way. She swallowed. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're channeling resources where they matter. Gabriel nodded, then exhaled. There's more. I'd like to discuss us. He caught her anxious expression and held up a calming hand. I don't mean to push, but this past week I haven't been able to shake the feeling that we left so much unsaid. I'd like to see you, away from the office, to talk properly. Her pulse skittered. Gabriel? She began, torn. Part of her wanted to keep pushing it off, not wanting to risk a personal conversation exploding amid professional obligations. Another part of her knew they couldn't avoid it forever. I'm not sure. He dipped his head, his tone soft. No pressure. I just believe we owe it to ourselves to have a candid conversation. No cameras, no audience, no quick exits. If you can find time, maybe dinner this week, or coffee on the weekend. The thought made her breath catch. Dinner implied something more personal, more intimate. Could she navigate that minefield without revealing Andrew's paternity? Or was it finally time to open up, repercussions be damned? She weighed the possibilities, her eyes drifting to the busy cityscape beyond the window. Okay, she said quietly. Dinner might work. I need to arrange a babysitter for Andrew, though. I can't leave him home alone. At the mention of her son, Gabriel's expression flickered. Some unspoken question hovered in his gaze. He clearly saw how central Andrew was to her life. Of course, any day that works for you. I'll accommodate. She gave a tentative nod. Let's say Thursday night? I'll confirm once I check with my neighbor about babysitting. He smiled, relief evident. Thank you. Here. He handed her a small card with a different number than the one she had. This is my private line, in case you need anything or want to change plans. She held the card gingerly. It was a tangible bridge between their once intertwined lives and the future that now lay uncertainly ahead. I appreciate it, she said, her voice almost a whisper. He glanced at his watch, then back at her. I have to rush to another meeting, but I look forward to Thursday. Truly. With that, he stepped forward, close enough that her heart stuttered, and gently pressed a light farewell touch to her arm. Then he was gone, the door clicking softly behind him, leaving her standing in the hush of the glass-walled office. For a long moment she just stood there, gaze flickering to the empty space he'd occupied. Could she handle this next step? Could she look him in the eye, share a meal, and walk away without telling him about Andrew? Every fiber in her body told her that time was running out for half-truths. At last, she gathered her bag and left, her heels tapping an uneven rhythm across the polished floor. A swirl of questions followed her into the elevator, accompanied by a single, strong resolution. If she was to protect Andrew's future, maybe it was time to finally let Gabriel into the past, and present he never knew he had. Thursday arrived with a hush of anticipation. That morning, Rebecca awoke before her alarm. She lay in bed, heart thrumming with a mix of anxiety and curious excitement. It had been years since she'd been on what might be considered a date, let alone with someone like Gabriel Lawson. She told herself it was just dinner, a chance to clear the air and talk honestly, but deep down she knew the stakes were far higher. Andrew, meanwhile, bounced around the apartment with his usual morning energy. "Mommy, you said Miss Clara is coming tonight?" he asked, eyes lighting up at the mention of their neighbor. Rebecca nodded. "Yes, she'll look after you while I go out to see a friend." Her voice wavered only slightly. She and Clara had arranged this babysitting agreement many times before, but never had it felt so nerve-wracking to leave Andrew behind. "Don't worry, I'll be back before bedtime." Truthfully, she wasn't certain how long dinner with Gabriel would last. Would they talk for hours, or would it end abruptly, overshadowed by confessions or regret? She tried to function normally at work, though her co-workers teased her about dressing a bit more smartly than usual. A crisp blouse with delicate earrings that caught the light. She brushed off their jests with a half-smile, not ready to share details of her personal life. By the afternoon, her hands trembled as she typed out final emails, her mind drifting to the evening ahead. Around 5, she rushed home, relieved that Clara had arrived early. The kindly woman, around 60 with a warm smile, was eager to entertain Andrew with crafts and a movie. "Go, have fun," Clara insisted, pushing Rebecca gently toward her bedroom to get ready. "You deserve it." Nodding, Rebecca slipped away to dress. She chose a simple but elegant black dress, one that flattered her figure without feeling too formal. Studying herself in the mirror, she recalled the last time she'd dressed for a night out and realized how long it had been. A subtle dab of lipstick, a quick brush of her hair, and then she stood there, heart pounding. Andrew poked his head into the room. "Mommy, you look pretty," he declared, beaming. "Where are you going again?" She forced a smile. "Just dinner with a friend. Be good for Miss Clara, okay?" He nodded seriously, then flung his arms around her in a tight hug. "Bye, Mommy." His little display of affection melted her heart. She kissed his forehead, whispering her love. Then she mustered her courage, grabbed her purse, and left the apartment. Outside, she found Gabriel's car waiting at the curb, though not the sleek town car from before. Tonight he'd come in a tasteful, mid-range sedan, perhaps trying to avoid the flash of luxury. He leaned against the passenger side door, checking his phone, but looked up instantly when he sensed her approach. A smile of quiet admiration flickered across his face. "You look lovely," he murmured, opening the door for her. Her cheeks warmed. "Thank you. So do you." He wore a tailored blazer with no tie, a crisp white shirt open at the collar, approachable, yet undeniably polished. She slid into the passenger seat, nerves buzzing as he rounded the front to take the driver's seat. The smell of fresh leather mixed with a subtle, masculine scent. His cologne, perhaps. He started the engine, and they pulled away from the curb under a pastel sunset that streaked the sky in pinks and oranges. Silence drifted between them for a few blocks, until Gabriel cleared his throat. "I reserved a quiet table at a small Italian place. I hope that's all right," he said. "Nothing too flashy." "That sounds nice," Rebecca replied, hands clasped in her lap. "I appreciate that." He nodded, turning at a light. After a moment, he ventured softly, "How's Andrew?" She tried to contain the surge of emotion. "He's good. Playing with our neighbor tonight. He asked if the nice man would be coming back to visit." Her lips curved slightly. Gabriel's eyes flickered with something she couldn't fully read. "I'm glad he has a trustworthy babysitter." He hesitated, then added quietly, "He's a sweet kid." In her chest, her heart twisted. If only he knew the truth of those words, why Andrew might remind him of someone, or why he'd felt such an odd pull to help him that first night at the gala. She swallowed, focusing on the road. "Yes, he's a good boy," she murmured. Soon they reached a quiet side street dotted with small restaurants. Gabriel parked near a quaint trattoria whose soft, glowing sign read, La Via Rosa. They slipped inside to find a cozy interior, old photographs on brick walls, candlelit tables spaced far enough for privacy. A hostess greeted them warmly, leading them to a corner booth with plush seating. The faint aroma of fresh basil and garlic filled the air. Once seated, Gabriel placed a gentle hand on the small of her back, helping her settle. "Is this okay?" he asked, gesturing to the dimly lit space. She nodded. "It's perfect." If her voice trembled slightly, he pretended not to notice. A waiter appeared to pour water, hand them menus, and mention the day's specials. Gabriel let her order first, a glass of white wine and a simple pasta dish. He requested a dark red wine and a chef's specialty. When the waiter left, a hush enveloped them. Rebecca's gaze flickered around, noting the murmur of other diners, the soft clink of cutlery. Then she forced herself to face Gabriel. "So," she said, feeling her pulse kick up. "You wanted to talk." He set his menu aside, leaning forward on his forearms. "I did," he answered gently. "I want to understand how you've been. Really been. Not just the few details you shared at the foundation meeting." She inhaled slowly, mind spinning. "Where do I start?" she asked. "It's been 4 years since you left for your expansions. In that time, I went back to finish my degree part-time, worked odd jobs, and eventually found my non-profit role. You saw how I'm living, small apartment, but Andrew and I manage. It's not glamorous, but we're okay." Gabriel listened intently, his jaw tightening at moments. "I admire you," he said quietly. "Raising a child alone, working and studying, that's no small feat." His eyes flickered with regret. "If I'd known what you were facing, maybe I—" He caught himself sighing. "I'm sorry." The apology triggered a swell of conflicting emotions. Part of her yearned to accept it, to cradle the warmth in his voice. Another part flared with resentment for all the lonely nights and silent heartbreak. In the end, she just nodded. Life can be hard, but it shapes us, too. He reached for his wine as it arrived, swirling it thoughtfully. "And Andrew's father," he began, then caught her startled look. He paused, uncertain. "Forgive me if that's too personal. I was just wondering if he's ever been part of the picture or—" Rebecca's heart lurched. Here it was, the direct question. The moment hung in the air like a pendulum, threatening to swing dangerously close to the truth. She stiffened, eyes flicking to the flickering candle. "No," she said slowly, carefully. "Not really." Gabriel's brow furrowed. "I see. Does Andrew ask about him?" She swallowed, forcing a neutral expression. "He's only 3, so he's curious in a childlike way. I tell him we have each other, and that's enough." Guilt tugged at her. She was skirting the real explanation, but she couldn't bear to drop the bombshell in the middle of a candlelit restaurant. He studied her for a moment, perhaps sensing there was more beneath the surface. But he didn't press, instead nodding quietly. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line," he said. "I just hate the thought of you facing everything alone." She mustered a half smile. "You hate it so much you've decided to champion single moms everywhere," she teased lightly, referencing his recent philanthropic push. Her tone was kind, if a bit shaky. A small grin tugged at his lips. "I guess so." He sipped his wine, and a lull settled over them until the waiter came by with bread and olive oil. Once they were alone again, Gabriel softly broached another subject. "We never really talked about how we ended, or how I left. I can't change the past, but I'd like to understand what it meant for you." She pressed her lips together, memory stabbing her. "It meant I lost someone I thought I might build a future with," she admitted quietly. "Everything happened so fast. Your opportunities, your exit. I was left uncertain, feeling discarded. Whether that was your intention or not, it's how it felt." Pain flickered in his eyes. "I never wanted you to feel discarded. At the time, I was so focused on making a name for myself. I told myself I'd come back once things stabilized, but it never did. Every day was a new fire to put out or a new investor to court. I convinced myself it was easier to let go than to drag you along for a turbulent ride." She set down her water glass. "You told me once I was the only person you felt truly understood your vision," she whispered, voice shaking with old hurt. "I guess that wasn't enough to keep you from leaving." His face was pale. "I was wrong. I messed up. And not a day goes by that I don't wonder how I could have handled it differently." Rebecca's eyes burned. Their conversation felt like an old wound finally getting air. She reached for the bread, busying her hands. "That's done now. We can't go back. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. It's just how things unfolded." Gabriel nodded, silent for a moment. Then he spoke in a hushed tone. "Do you think we have any chance to rebuild a connection? Or at least a friendship? I know so much has changed." Her heart pounded. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've lived with your absence for so long. It's not just me, Gabriel. I have Andrew to consider. Anyone who enters my life now doesn't just get me, they get him too." He shifted in his seat, expression intent. "I understand. I respect that. And I'd never want to disrupt his life. But maybe I can earn your trust again." The sincerity in his eyes made her breath hitch. She imagined all the ways her confession about Andrew might upend everything. How would Gabriel feel if he discovered he was already Andrew's father? Would he resent her for keeping him in the dark, or demand a place in Andrew's life immediately? She forced herself to maintain composure. "We'll see," she said softly. "I can't make promises right now." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of food. Steaming plates of pasta, fragrant sauces. They ate in subdued silence, each lost in thought. Occasionally, Gabriel asked about her work at the nonprofit, or she'd inquire about his latest expansion project, but always an undercurrent of tension pulsed, unspoken questions about the future swirling alongside the unshared truth. By the time they finished, the candle had burned low and the restaurant was starting to empty. Gabriel settled the bill, ignoring her protests about splitting. They stepped out into the cool night air. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves along the sidewalk. He walked her to his car, pausing under a street lamp that cast a warm glow around them. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said, voice quiet. "I hope this was a start. Maybe next time I can meet Andrew, if you'd be comfortable with that." Rebecca froze, her heart vaulting into her throat. Her mind screamed that he was unknowingly asking to meet his own son. The shock stole her words. Finally, she managed, I'm not sure if that's wise yet. Let's take it one step at a time." He studied her face, puzzling over her sudden apprehension. Then he nodded gently. "Of course, one step at a time. You can decide when the moment is right." She swallowed a surge of conflicting emotions. In a heartbeat, she wanted to both hug him and run. Instead, she murmured goodnight and eased into the passenger seat, letting him drive her home in silence. The stars overhead looked far away and cold, much like the questions swirling inside her. Could she keep hiding the truth, or was she on the brink of confession? At her apartment, he pulled to a stop by the curb. Quietly, he offered to walk her up, but she declined with a polite smile, not wanting to stir Andrew. "Thank you for dinner," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "We'll talk soon." He nodded, gaze lingering. "I'll wait for your call. Good night, Rebecca." She slipped out of the car, heart pounding. As she climbed the stairs, she heard his engine fade into the night. Once inside, Clara gave a cheery wave from the living room couch where Andrew lay curled asleep, crayons scattered around him. "Everything went all right?" Clara asked, raising a brow. Rebecca managed a nod. "Yes, fine. Thank you for watching him." But her voice trembled. Clara gave her a sympathetic look, then gathered her things, leaving with a quiet good night. Alone in the hushed apartment, Rebecca lowered herself onto the couch near Andrew's sleeping form. The child's gentle breathing was a soothing anchor. She stroked his hair, heart aching. Was it time to tell Gabriel the truth? 100 fears crowded her mind, but one loomed largest. If she waited too long, she risked hurting them all more deeply. She glanced at Andrew's small hand clasping a blue crayon. Could she deny him the chance to know his father, a man who, for all his flaws, seemed genuinely repentant and caring? Tears pricked her eyes. Sooner or later, secrets had a way of coming to light. Perhaps it was time she let them. But she knew once the words were spoken, there'd be no turning back, and that thought both terrified and filled her with the tiniest glimmer of hope. 2 days had passed since Rebecca's dinner with Gabriel, and she still felt like her life was balancing on a fragile precipice. She went about her days as normally as possible, waking Andrew, packing lunches, attending her shift at the non-profit, yet her mind reeled with the same loop of questions. When to tell him? How to tell him? And most pressingly, would he stay once he knew? The catalyst arrived on a quiet Saturday morning. Rebecca was in the kitchen wearing sweats and a messy bun, scraping together pancake batter for Andrew's breakfast. Her phone buzzed on the counter, displaying an unknown number, though some instinct told her it was Gabriel's private line. With flour-dusted fingers, she slid her thumb across the screen to answer. "Hello? Rebecca, hi. It's Gabriel." His voice carried a courteous warmth, but underneath she sensed a careful optimism. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." She glanced at Andrew, who sat at the table, flipping through a picture book about animals. "No, not at all," she said, trying to steady her heartbeat. "How are you?" A soft exhale drifted through the line. "I'm well enough," he answered. "Listen, I've been thinking about you, about our conversation the other night. I was wondering if you might want to see a bit of the new childcare center my foundation is sponsoring. The facility is still under construction, but it could be a chance to get your input if you're interested." She felt a stir of gratitude at his sincerity. He truly seemed invested in improving resources for single parents. And maybe, she thought, if they spent more time together in a real-world scenario, she'd get a clearer sense of whether he could handle the bigger truth. "Sure," she found herself saying. "That sounds productive." "Excellent," he replied, a note of relief in his tone. "What about this afternoon? I can pick you up, or we can meet there, whatever's easier." Rebecca glanced at Andrew, who'd started singing quietly under his breath. She knew he'd be disappointed if she left him again so soon. "Could I bring Andrew?" she asked, the question tumbling out before she fully processed it. For weeks, she'd hesitated to let them spend time together, yet somehow it felt like a path toward clarity. "He's curious about the places I work with?" A brief silence fluttered over the line. No doubt Gabriel was considering the invitation's significance. "I'd be honored to meet him," he said quietly, a certain heaviness in his voice. "Are you sure that's okay?" Her heart thumped. "Yes," she said, inhaling a bracing breath. "It's time, I think, for you to meet him properly." "All right," Gabriel murmured. "I'll come by around 2 if that works." "That's fine," she confirmed. After a polite goodbye, she hung up, feeling simultaneously hollowed and jittery. She realized that in inviting Gabriel to spend an afternoon with Andrew, she was dangling dangerously close to the truth. If Gabriel saw Andrew up close, his features, his mannerisms, would the resemblance become impossible to miss? "Mommy, are the pancakes ready?" Andrew asked, peering up at her with bright eyes. Rebecca turned, forcing a smile. "Yes, sweetie, just a minute." She ladled batter onto the griddle, heart pounding with the weight of her secret. If everything went well, she might finally find the courage to let the words out. "Andrew is your son." And the only prayer she had was that Gabriel would rise to the challenge. By early afternoon, Andrew was in a whirlwind of excitement, mostly because Rebecca had told him they were going on an adventure with the nice man from the party. He didn't fully understand, but he sensed the specialness. Rebecca dressed him in a neat polo shirt and jeans, combed his hair, and slipped on a pair of sneakers. For herself, she chose casual but presentable attire, a light sweater and comfortable pants. Her reflection in the mirror revealed nerves dancing in her eyes. At precisely 2, Gabriel arrived. This time, he parked on the street rather than pulling into her small lot. When Rebecca opened the apartment door, Andrew darted up, big grin shining. "Hi," the boy greeted cheerfully. "Remember me?" Gabriel crouched to his level, a gentle smile warming his face. "Of course I do," he said, offering Andrew a handshake. "Nice to see you again, Andrew." The child hesitated, then gave him a high five instead. Rebecca watched the moment, her heart twisting. If only Gabriel knew that Andrew's cheerful greeting carried all the eagerness of a child meeting his own father. She cleared her throat, locking the door behind them. "Thanks for offering to drive," she told Gabriel as he escorted them outside. "Where exactly is this new facility?" "Not too far," he answered, guiding them to a mid-size SUV with child-friendly interior. "About 20 minutes from here, a refurbished community center." Andrew climbed into the back seat with Rebecca's help, settling into a booster seat Gabriel had arranged. She cast him a curious glance. "You were prepared," she remarked, buckling Andrew in. Gabriel shrugged, a faint color rising to his cheeks. My foundation sometimes transports kids for events and tours. I thought it'd be safer if I brought a seat along just in case. Didn't want Andrew stuck without proper safety." Rebecca's chest tightened. That simple act of thoughtfulness hinted at paternal instincts Gabriel didn't even realize he possessed. She slid into the passenger seat, exhaling unsteadily. "Thank you," she murmured. The drive passed in a blend of small talk and Andrew's excited chatter. He pointed out interesting buildings, asked Gabriel questions about whether they'd see any bulldozers at the construction site. Gabriel answered with patient good humor, glancing in the rearview mirror every so often. Rebecca marveled at how smoothly they got along, like puzzle pieces that, unbeknownst to them, already belonged together. Eventually, they pulled into a side street near a humble brick structure with scaffolding around part of its exterior. A large sign read, "Future Home of Sunrise Childcare, sponsored by Lawson Innovations, in partnership with the Blakewood Foundation." Inside the fenced-off yard, a few workers milled around, hauling materials. Gabriel parked, then led them through a temporary entrance where a site manager greeted them. He introduced himself as Keith, clearly respecting Gabriel's presence but not overly formal. "This is the main hall," Keith explained, gesturing around an expansive interior. Some walls were freshly painted in soft pastel colors. The smell of sawdust and fresh plaster clung to the air. "Once finished, we'll have a big play area here," Keith said, pointing to an open space, "and over there smaller rooms for nap time and crafts. We're making sure everything is up to code and child-safe." Andrew's eyes lit up and he scampered forward, peering around with curiosity. "Wow," he breathed, imagining the future bustle of children, slides, maybe painting corners. Rebecca hovered close, ensuring he didn't stray too far from the designated safe zone. Gabriel observed the boy's excitement with a gentle smile. "What do you think, Andrew? Think kids would like it here?" Andrew nodded vigorously. "Yes, it's big, and maybe we can have lots of toys?" He glanced at Rebecca. "Mommy, can I come here too?" She laughed lightly, smoothing a hand over his hair. "We'll see, sweetheart. It depends on the program." Keith smiled. "We'd love to have you if you're still in the age range, buddy. We'll be serving children from about 1 to 5 years old." Andrew beamed, bounding around. Meanwhile, Gabriel signaled for Keith to give them some space, so the manager excused himself to check on the workers. The instant they were more or less alone, Gabriel turned to Rebecca, voice lowered. "I'd love your perspective," he said. "If you notice anything a single mom would need, be it parent resource corners, private areas for breastfeeding, safety measures, anything, please point it out." She walked with him along the perimeter, Andrew trailing after them, occasionally squealing at the echo in the half-finished hall. Rebecca noted the layout, remarking on the need for slip-proof floors, sturdy child gates, a safe outdoor playground. "Moms with strollers need enough space in hallways," she added, "and an accessible bathroom is crucial." Gabriel nodded, tapping notes on his phone. "Great input. We can integrate those features before final inspections." They came upon a corner where a row of windows overlooked a small fenced lawn. Andrew pressed his face to the glass, entranced by the birds hopping on the grass. Gabriel drifted closer to Rebecca, lowering his voice so Andrew wouldn't overhear. "You know, I can't stop thinking about what you said, how single parents juggle so much without consistent support," he murmured. "I've had nights thinking if I'd abandoned you when you needed help most." He trailed off, regret tinging each word. Her throat constricted. "That's in the past," she whispered, though part of her longed to say more. "We're here now." He inclined his head, searching her gaze. "Yes, and now?" He hesitated. "Rebecca, seeing you with Andrew. It's clear you two share something special. He's a bright kid. It makes me wonder if I would have done anything differently if I'd known more about your situation at the time." Her breath caught. She almost spoke the truth right then. The words perched on the edge of her tongue, but the surrounding workers and half-finished walls felt too exposed. Instead, she simply nodded, tears threatening. "We all wish we could turn back time sometimes." Andrew broke the tension by tugging on Gabriel's sleeve. "Mr. Gabe, can I see outside?" Gabriel blinked, turning to the boy. "Of course. Let's ask Keith if it's safe, okay?" He motioned for the site manager, who escorted them to a side courtyard. Freshly poured concrete created a path to a soon-to-be playground area. Andrew happily stomped around, admiring the space where swings and slides would eventually stand. Rebecca watched them from a few steps back, her heart in her throat. Gabriel knelt beside Andrew, pointing out where a swing set might go, or a sandbox. The boy's squeals of excitement echoed in the open air. She felt an ache so deep it almost stole her breath. This was what a father-child bond could look like, if only he knew. Eventually, Keith signaled that the site tour was done. They thanked him for his time, then headed back to the SUV. Andrew practically bounced with energy, chattering about the big new daycare. Gabriel smiled indulgently, helping the boy climb into his booster seat. Once again, Rebecca noted how easily he navigated that paternal role, even without awareness of who Andrew truly was. The drive home was a swirl of Andrew's excited talk about the future facility. Gabriel joined in, humoring the child's grand ideas about a giant rocket slide. Rebecca listened, tears prickling her eyes at the innocence of it all. Before long, they reached her building and Gabriel parked. Unbuckling Andrew, she murmured, "Thank you, sweetie. Now we have to say goodbye to Mr. Gabe." "Oh, do we have to?" Andrew pouted. Then he brightened. "Mr. Gabe, can you come inside and see my crayons?" Gabriel looked at Rebecca for permission. She hesitated. Letting him into their apartment again might be a step closer to a revelation she wasn't sure she could delay. But Andrew's hopeful face softened her resolve. "Sure," she relented quietly. For a few minutes. Back in the apartment, Andrew proudly showed off his latest drawings spread across the small coffee table. Gabriel admired them, asking questions about each scribble. Rebecca hovered nearby, arms folded, heart in turmoil. She wondered if Gabriel noticed how Andrew's chin or the shape of his eyes matched his own. Did he see any reflection of himself in the boy? At last, with dusk settling, Gabriel checked his watch. "I should be going. This was great. I really appreciate your input today, Rebecca. And Andrew, thank you for coming along and giving us your ideas." Andrew beamed. "Bye, Mr. Gabe. Will you come again?" Gabriel's eyes flicked to Rebecca, waiting. She took a bracing breath. "We'll see, sweetheart," she said carefully. Gabriel nodded. "I'll check in soon," he promised, heading to the door. Before stepping out, he turned back to Rebecca, voice low. "Thank you for letting me spend time with him. It means a lot more than you know." She managed a shaky smile. I'm glad." He lingered a second, like he wanted to say something else, but the moment passed. With a soft goodbye, he slipped away, the door shutting behind him. Andrew scampered back to his crayons, humming a tune, oblivious to the storm that brewed in his mother's chest. Rebecca sank onto the couch, hands trembling. The sight of Gabriel interacting with Andrew had been beautiful, yet also a sharp reminder that they were living a lie. Andrew deserved the truth, and Gabriel deserved the chance to decide how to handle it. Could she tell him soon? Perhaps a private conversation, away from Andrew's ears, where she could lay out everything. She feared his reaction, but she feared the damage of continued secrecy even more. Looking at Andrew, who was now hunched over his coloring, she found her own resolve. For his sake, no, for both their sakes, she had to do it. Taking a deep breath, she took out her phone and composed a message to Gabriel. "Thank you for today. Andrew had a wonderful time. There's something important we need to discuss. Could we meet again? Just the two of us? This week?" She hit send before her courage could falter. Then she set the phone aside, heart hammering. In the coming days, the greatest secret of her life would come to light. And whatever followed, she could only hope love, in some form, might prevail. Rebecca's text hung in the air like a held breath. She half expected Gabriel to reply immediately, given how their interactions had quickened since the gala. But the minutes stretched, turning into an hour. Andrew, engrossed in his drawing, asked her if he could have a snack. She fixed him some fruit, all the while glancing at her phone every other minute. Still nothing. Eventually, she put her phone on the counter, determined not to let her anxiety rule her evening. She washed dishes, tidied up Andrew's crayons, and made him a simple dinner. By the time she had read him a bedtime story and tucked him in, the sky outside had darkened completely, and the city lights glimmered through the apartment window. It was nearly 9 when her phone buzzed at last. She rushed to check it, heart pounding. Gabriel's name flashed on the screen. "Thank you for letting me know. Let's meet tomorrow night if you're available. Just us, as you suggested. Name a time, place, and I'll be there." She exhaled shakily, relief and dread mingling. He hadn't asked for details, clearly respecting her request for a private conversation. Without overthinking, she typed back, "How about 7 p.m. at Maplewood Park, near the pond? It should be quiet then." He replied almost immediately, "I'll see you there. Looking forward to it." She set the phone down, nerves thrumming in her veins. Maplewood Park was a small, tree-lined expanse where the city's bustle died away, replaced by murmuring leaves and trickling water. She chose it deliberately, needing a peaceful, neutral ground to reveal the secret she'd guarded for so long. Despite her earlier resolution, though, the reality of the coming confession now felt overwhelming. Part of her feared he'd be furious, that he'd blame her for hiding Andrew from him. Another part worried that he'd try to sweep Andrew into his powerful world, leaving her behind. And a tiny voice inside whispered a more optimistic hope, that maybe this could forge a new bond for the three of them. That night, sleep came fitfully. She replayed every scenario in her mind, 1,000 versions of Gabriel's reaction, 100 outcomes for how their lives might change. She tossed and turned until dawn's early light. When morning arrived, she woke with a pounding heart, recalling that by this time tomorrow he'd know the truth. She stumbled through her workday in a daze, hardly retaining anything from meetings or emails. Fortunately, her tasks were routine enough that she could function on autopilot. Her supervisor asked if she was feeling all right. She muttered about a slight headache, forcing a polite smile. After picking up Andrew from daycare in the late afternoon, she dropped him off at Clara's apartment next door. The kind neighbor smiled, sensing Rebecca's agitation. "Don't worry," Clara said, patting Rebecca's arm. "Andrew will be fine with me tonight. He can watch a little cartoon or read books until you're done with your meeting." Rebecca mustered a grateful nod, bending to hug her son. "I'll be back later, sweetheart," she murmured. "Miss Clara will look after you. Be good, okay?" Andrew gave a thumbs up, eyes shining. "Bye, Mommy." He scampered inside, already chattering about the evening's plans. She swallowed a lump in her throat, touched by his carefree innocence. Outside, twilight stretched across the sky. The walk to Maplewood Park was just a few blocks, so Rebecca decided to forego any ride. She needed the fresh air to calm her nerves. Each step brought her closer to the inevitable conversation. Wind rustled the trees overhead as she entered the park. The lampposts blinked on, illuminating winding paths and a few scattered benches. A few dog walkers ambled by, but overall the place felt tranquil, wrapped in a hush of dusk. The pond sparkled in the low light, ringed by reeds and a small footbridge. She glanced around, spotting Gabriel's silhouette near a bench just off the path. He wore a dark coat, hands in his pockets, gazing out at the water. The sight sent her heart into a lurch. She forced herself forward. He turned when she was a few steps away, a gentle smile curling his mouth. "Rebecca," he greeted, voice soft. "Thank you for meeting me." She nodded, clearing her throat. "Thanks for coming." Glancing around, she noted how the trees and shrubs created a private nook near the pond. No one else seemed within earshot. This was it, her moment of reckoning. She sank onto the bench and he joined her, leaving a careful space between them. A few seconds passed as the frogs croaked somewhere in the reeds. Rebecca took a breath, searching for the right words. "Gabriel," she finally managed, "I asked you here because there's something I've been holding back. Something I should have told you a long time ago." His expression grew intent. "Go on," he encouraged gently. She clasped her hands in her lap, noticing how they trembled. "When we were working together, before you left, things between us got serious." She swallowed. "You remember that, right?" He nodded, quiet. "I do. It meant a lot to me, more than I ever fully admitted." She found a small, humorless smile. "Yes. Well, shortly after you left, I discovered I was pregnant." Gabriel froze, his entire body rigid. For a heartbeat, neither of them breathed. The croaking frogs and distant hum of city traffic seemed to intensify. Slowly, his eyes widened in dawning realization. His gaze flicked away, then back to hers, as if trying to confirm it wasn't some misunderstanding. You mean Andrew?" he whispered, voice hoarse. "He's mine?" Emotion caught in her throat, tears pricking her eyes. "Yes," she breathed, barely audible. "He's yours, Gabriel." A sharp exhale escaped him, as though he'd been punched in the gut. He pressed a hand over his mouth, gripping his coat lapel with the other. "How?" His voice trembled. "I mean, I never knew. Why didn't you tell me?" She swallowed hard, tears blurring her vision. "I tried. Or I thought about it at least, but you were gone, swept up in your new deals. I didn't even have a reliable way to reach you at first. Then months passed and I felt hurt, abandoned. I was so proud, I guess. I kept telling myself that if you had wanted to stay in my life, you wouldn't have left so abruptly." His eyes shone with something raw. "Rebecca," he murmured, pain threading each syllable. "All this time, you've been raising him alone. And I had no idea. My God." She grasped at composure, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. I didn't want you to feel trapped, or to resent me for holding you back from your ambitions. And then, as the years went by, it became harder and harder to figure out how to say it." He closed his eyes for a moment, wrestling with the weight of her words. Slowly, he opened them again, his voice hushed with guilt and awe. "He's my son," he said, as though testing the phrase. "All those times I saw him, in your apartment, at the Gala, I had no clue." A small, almost hysterical laugh escaped him. "And I felt drawn to him, like some inexplicable bond, but I couldn't place it. Her heart clenched. She reached for a tissue in her bag, wiping away tears. "Gabriel, I'm so sorry," she repeated. "I never wanted to deny Andrew a father, but I was scared of disrupting your life after so much time had passed, and scared of being hurt again." A tear glistened in his own eye, which he blinked away fiercely. His voice trembled when he finally spoke. "I don't know whether to be angry or devastated or just grateful you told me now." He turned his gaze to the pond, water shimmering in the lamplight, then back to her. "How old is he exactly? 3, right?" 3.5, she confirmed softly. "His birthday is in July. I had him alone in a small clinic. I named him Andrew because, well, we once talked about how you admired your grandfather, Andrew. I remembered that." At that, a choked sound caught in Gabriel's throat. "You remembered," he echoed, eyes misting. "I can't believe this. My son's name. I had no idea." She set a trembling hand on his arm, a surge of compassion overwhelming her anger, her guilt, everything. "Gabriel, if you hate me for hiding this, I understand," she said, her voice raw. "All I ask is that you don't take it out on Andrew. He's innocent, and he's such a good kid." A flicker of alarm crossed Gabriel's features. "Hate you? No, I'm shocked, yes. Hurt, maybe. But how could I hate you? I'm the one who left. I created the conditions that led to this mess." He raked a hand through his hair. "God, I feel like I missed so much. His birth, his first steps, his first words, all gone." Tears welled in her eyes again. "I know," she whispered, "and I'm so sorry." He squeezed his eyes shut, then opened them, placing his palm gently over her hand. "No more apologies," he said thickly. "What's done is done. Now I need to figure out how to be a father to a little boy who doesn't even know me by that word, and how not to blow apart the life you've built." Relief and fear mingled in her chest. "You want to be involved, even after all this?" His gaze hardened with resolve. "He's my son, Rebecca. Of course I want to be involved. There's no question in my mind. The only question is how to do it without scaring him. Or you." She broke into sobs then, all the pent-up emotion cascading free. He tentatively wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. She let him, burying her face in his coat for a moment, feeling his heart thud in tandem with hers. Slowly she steadied, wiping her cheeks. "I don't want to take Andrew away from you," he murmured. "I just want to be part of his world. I have so much to learn, but I'll do whatever it takes." Fresh tears sprang to her eyes, this time tears of gratitude. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. "Slowly, step by step. He knows you as the nice man who helped us. We can start there and ease him into the truth." Gabriel nodded, eyes full of determination. "Yes, whatever pace you decide is best, I'll follow. Just please, don't shut me out again." She shook her head. "I won't. I promise." For a long while they sat side by side on the bench, the park's silence enveloping them. The pond's surface glimmered under the faint glow of lamp posts, while insects and frogs provided the night's soft soundtrack. Finally, Gabriel spoke in a hushed tone. "Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me. I know it wasn't easy." She let out a quivering breath. "I should have told you sooner, but I was terrified. Letting you in now is still scary, but I owe it to Andrew. And to us, I suppose." He nodded, pulling her gently into a renewed embrace. She sank against him, letting the quiet comfort blossom. The hush of the park cradled them, and in that moment the weight of secrets lifted, replaced by the fragile hope of forging a new bond, one that might heal old wounds and at last unite father and son. For days after their meeting in the park, Rebecca and Gabriel navigated a whirlwind of new emotions and decisions. They traded careful messages, phone calls filled with a hesitant but hopeful tone, as they discussed how best to introduce Gabriel's true role in Andrew's life. Every conversation felt monumental, both thrilling and daunting. Andrew, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift, continued asking if Mr. Gabe could visit so he could show off new drawings or toys. Rebecca gently relayed these requests to Gabriel, who responded with warmth and gratitude. They agreed to proceed little by little, first letting the two spend more casual time together, then sharing the truth when Andrew seemed comfortable enough to understand. Finally, on a mild Saturday afternoon, Gabriel came over at Rebecca's invitation. She had prepared Andrew by saying, "My friend Gabriel is visiting for lunch. He wants to see your artwork." The boy's face lit with delight, oblivious to the emotional undercurrents. As soon as Gabriel stepped through the door, Andrew tugged him eagerly toward the living room, where a makeshift art station awaited. "I made a big rocket picture," Andrew announced, spreading out a crayon-drawn spaceship across the coffee table. "See? It has fire coming out so it can go to space." Gabriel kneeled beside him, eyes shining. "That's incredible. I bet it could reach the moon." Andrew beamed, and Rebecca stood back, watching them with a lump in her throat. In Gabriel's gentle encouragement of the boy, in the way their faces mirrored each other's excitement, she could see an echo of the father-son bond that had been missing all these years. Soon, Rebecca served a simple lunch of sandwiches and fruit. They gathered around the small table, Andrew between them, rattling on about his favorite cartoons and the super-tall building he'd glimpsed in the city. Gabriel listened intently, occasionally meeting Rebecca's gaze as if to ask, "Is this really happening?" After lunch, Andrew hopped off his chair. "Come see my room, Mr. Gabe," he said, grabbing Gabriel's hand. "I have dinosaurs." Gabriel shot Rebecca a tentative glance for permission. She nodded, heart twisting in a mix of pride and sorrow. "Go ahead, I'll clean up here." With that, she was left stacking dishes alone in the kitchen, hearing Andrew's gleeful chatter down the hall. The moment felt surreal. Gabriel Lawson, unstoppable CEO, now in her son's small bedroom, admiring plastic dinosaurs. She leaned against the counter, letting tears well in her eyes. This was the family moment she'd never been able to give Andrew before. Minutes later, Gabriel returned, looking both elated and contemplative. "He's, showing me every toy he owns," he said quietly, coming up beside her. "He has a million questions." She smiled, wiping her hands. "He's curious about everything. Sorry if it's overwhelming." He shook his head. "It's not. It's wonderful. I've never felt so welcome in someone's life." Then, voice lowering, he added, "I can't thank you enough for letting me in now." Their eyes locked, a ripple of shared emotion passing between them. She set the dish rag aside, leaning against the counter. "You're his father, Gabriel. He deserves to know you, and despite everything, I can see you care about him." His throat worked. "I do. More than I thought possible in such a short time. He's incredible." A faint, rueful chuckle followed. "He's also a lot like I was at his age, I think. Always asking why." She laughed, a gentle sound. "Yes, I can see that." He started to speak again, but Andrew barreled in, a toy T-Rex in hand. "Mr. Gabe, can you make dinosaur sounds?" Gabriel arched a brow at Rebecca, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Well, let's see." He turned to Andrew and let out a playful roar. The boy dissolved into giggles. Watching them, Rebecca felt lightness bloom in her chest, a sense that maybe they could find a path forward. She let Andrew guide Gabriel back to the living room where they continued playing for an hour. Occasionally, Gabriel stole glances at her, as if to confirm the quiet awe coursing through them both. Eventually, the day wore on, and Andrew's energy showed signs of flagging. He yawned mid-dinosaur battle, prompting Rebecca to suggest quiet time. Gabriel took it as his cue to leave, though Andrew begged him to stay. Kneeling to the boy's level, Gabriel said softly, "I'll come back soon, okay? We can build a dinosaur rocket together next time." Andrew grinned. "Promise?" "Promise," Gabriel replied, offering a pinky swear that Andrew solemnly accepted. The sincerity of the child's trust melted something in Gabriel's features. He stood, turning to Rebecca, voice low. "May we talk outside for a moment?" She nodded. Leading him to the hallway, she closed the door behind them, giving Andrew space to play quietly. The corridor was lit by a single overhead bulb, its warmth illuminating Gabriel's earnest gaze. He exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "Rebecca, I want to do more, not just random visits or play dates. I want to support him, financially, emotionally, in every way a father should." Her heart squeezed. She'd anticipated this conversation, bracing for it. "I understand," she answered, "and I appreciate it. But I want us to go slow, to figure out the best arrangement for Andrew. He's happy to see you now, but we can't just spring 'I'm your dad' on him tomorrow. It needs to be gentle." He nodded, relief and seriousness etched in his expression. "Of course. I'll follow your lead, but please know, whatever he needs I want to provide. Whether that's a better place for you two to live or education funds or anything. I know I can't buy back lost years, but I want to be there for him." Emotion clogged her throat. "I won't deny we struggle sometimes," she admitted. "But I don't want Andrew thinking love is just fancy gifts. He's grown up seeing me scrap and save. I don't want to erase that, but I do want him to have opportunities." Gabriel's eyes shone with tenderness. "Then we'll find the right balance," he promised. "We can start a college fund, maybe ensure he has resources for whatever he dreams of, and I'll keep coming by, spending real time with him, because no amount of money replaces that." A tear slipped down her cheek. She pressed her lips together, nodding. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know Andrew will be thrilled to have someone cheering him on." A pause hovered, charged with emotion. He reached out, lightly brushing the tear from her cheek. "And what about us?" he asked gently, voice uneven. "I know this is complicated, but I still have feelings for you, Rebecca. I can't pretend otherwise." Her heart thudded. She'd felt it too, the undeniable pull each time their eyes met. But so much had changed. "I don't know," she whispered. "There's so much history and so much pain. I'm not sure if we can just jump into something again." He nodded, understanding in his gaze. "I'm not asking for instant romance," he said softly. "I'd just like the chance to mend what I broke, to show you I'm not the same man who left all those years ago. Maybe, in time, we could rediscover each other." Rebecca's pulse raced. A part of her did crave that possibility, the dream of a family unit, but trust would need rebuilding. Finally, she mustered a hesitant smile. "Let's focus on Andrew first," she murmured. "If we can co-parent smoothly and keep his well-being front and center, maybe we see where that leads us." He dipped his head in agreement, relief flooding his features. "That's fair. One step at a time, right?" She exhaled shakily. "Yes, one step at a time." Gabriel's hand slipped into hers, a gesture filled with both apology and promise. She let her fingers lace with his, standing close in the quiet hallway. Outside, a neighbor's television buzzed faintly, and footsteps passed on the floor above. But in their small circle, the moment felt profound. "Thank you," he murmured again, "for sharing Andrew with me, for letting me be part of your life, even if it's just to fix what I shattered." She squeezed his hand gently. "We all deserve second chances, especially Andrew. He deserves the best of both of us." A tremulous smile softened Gabriel's lips. "I'll do my best, always." They parted with a tender embrace, cautious but hopeful. When he left, Rebecca closed the door gently, leaning against it, heart pounding. Andrew wandered over, yawning. Where did Mr. Gabe go? She scooped him into a warm hug, pressing her cheek to his soft hair. "He went home, sweetheart, but he'll come visit again." She didn't yet say the word dad, knowing they had to ease into that conversation. "Do you like spending time with him?" Andrew nodded enthusiastically. "He's fun, and he asked lots of questions about my dinosaurs." She kissed his forehead. "Yes, he's very interested in your dinosaurs." Andrew pulled away, trotting off to find a toy, leaving Rebecca by the door. She smiled, though tears pricked her eyes. A cautious optimism bloomed in her chest. Gabriel wanted to be there, truly. Perhaps the broken threads of their past could be woven into a future for their son. In the weeks that followed, Gabriel visited often, sometimes for half an hour between meetings, sometimes on weekends for longer outings to the park. Andrew grew more comfortable, calling him Mr. Gabe, though now Rebecca occasionally caught the boy glancing at Gabriel with a deep curiosity. Eventually, she planned a gentle conversation to explain that Mr. Gabe was actually his father, that they hadn't told him earlier because grown-ups sometimes make mistakes, but they were trying to make it right now. The day she told Andrew, he blinked and asked a few questions. "So he's my real daddy?" he clarified, frowning in confusion. Rebecca explained again, yes, the man who'd been visiting was his dad, and they wanted to share that truth now that Mommy and Daddy had reconnected. Andrew processed it quietly, then broke into a tentative smile. "Cool," he said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Does that mean he'll help me with my dinosaur rocket?" Rebecca hugged him, tears of relief slipping free. "Yes," she whispered, voice thick. "Yes, he will." When Gabriel heard about that conversation, he was overcome with emotion, holding Andrew tight and promising him a world of adventures, dinosaurs and rockets included. The boy giggled, accepting it all with the resilience of childhood. And though challenges still lay ahead, legalities, explanations to friends and family, and the gradual process of forming a cohesive family, their path glowed with a new sense of unity. Slowly, as months turned into a year, Gabriel and Rebecca wove a life together, balancing co-parenting responsibilities with blooming feelings they'd once buried. There were disagreements and tough talks, tears over missed milestones, and joyful firsts as Gabriel taught Andrew to ride a bike. Through it all, they held on to the promise that honesty and communication could heal old wounds. One bright afternoon, Andrew ran to Rebecca with a big grin, having spent the day at Gabriel's place. "Mommy, Daddy showed me his office. So many computers," he exclaimed, breathless. She shared a conspiratorial smile with Gabriel, who stood nearby, proud and humble at once. Rebecca reached for both their hands, feeling the warmth of connection that bound them. Life had taken unexpected turns, but now they stood as a family. Though not every day was perfect, each one carried hope, courage, and the deep love they had for the little boy who'd brought them back together. And so, the secret that once threatened to keep them apart ultimately became the bond that reunited them. Their journey proved that sometimes the greatest gifts come from second chances, and that love, no matter how delayed or obscured, can still bloom brighter than ever when finally given the light of truth. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.